more often than not, you want to emphasize the important takeaway, the conclusion. You don't want to take them through your analysis you did at that Bloomberg terminal, or that's not the important part of the story. What you came up with is more often the important part of the story. With the conclusion first, you get this attention and retention curve benefits. As was stated, when the attention is higher, you get a chance to explain to them the important thing. Conclusion last. Sometimes, every once in a while, I might recommend you use that conclusion last. And this is the main reason, if you have a potentially hostile or skeptical audience. So if you know your audience is going to disagree with your conclusion, and you say it right off the bat, you may lose them. You may lose your chance to explain why this is your takeaway. So you may need to, in that case, emphasize the process. Yes?
Didn't we already just give our conclusion in the beginning, so isn't the middle kind of always reserved for explaining, the details that led you to the conclusion you stated, which you're going to summarize later on the end? I don't necessarily understand, repeating it again in the middle.
Okay. By this format, I mean the beginning, kind of tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've just told them. So in the beginning, you can't get into all the details of your conclusion. You just give them the overview, maybe the context, as Alan mentioned, and then you get into making your main point. But when you make your main point, you'll often face the decision. Do I start by taking you along this process of discovery that I went through to come to this conclusion, premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and then the conclusion? Or do you do it the other way around? And I would almost always advocate doing it this way. I like to use the example that imagine your presentation is putting together pieces of a puzzle. And if you give your audience the conclusion first, you're telling your audience the picture that will be on that puzzle when they put it together. If you use the conclusion last technique, you're asking your audience to put together pieces of a puzzle without a picture on it. And if any of you have ever done that, maybe you're on family vacation, you're trying to kill time. Has anyone ever done that? You tried to turn over a puzzle and put it together with just the pieces? It's much, much more difficult. But it does make you focus on the different pieces, how they fit together. And if that's the important part of your presentation, I want you to understand how these pieces fit together so that you understand you need to buy this product. And I know you were going to be a little skeptical if I just jumped right out at you, but now that you understand your company is going to be is doing this and it needs this, and et cetera, et cetera. All right, any questions on that? Some strategies on the beginning, strategies on the middle. Yes?
So is the beginning just presenting an issue or a problem, such as the company's not making money? The middle conclusion first is the company needs to make more money to stay in business, and here's how we're going to do it, and the end just wraps it all up?
Yes, that could be a good strategy. Your conclusion might be, here's how the company's going to do it. What I want to talk to you about today is we need to get into plastics. I know that sounds a little strange to you right now, but let me explain. Now let me get into plastics being the new thing we need to develop. That's how we're going to make money. And then I get into the other points you're making, Blake, about how our company's not doing well at this or that. Any other comments? Yes?
I see beginning as more of just a tease.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Jay?
Yes, so I'm a little confused on the conclusion last for preparing for hostile. Wouldn't it be beneficial to, if someone doesn't agree with you, to draw them in by starting with the conclusion? I know that you don't agree with this, but this is what I think plastics are going to be amazing in the next 10 years. And then you already gave the conclusion first. And that kind of makes them more attentive, being that, oh, okay, this guy I don't agree with him, now let me see what he's going to say. So would it actually be helpful to start with the conclusion if they are hostile?
All right, what do you think, Rudy?
I thought the exact same thing, Jay. I thought that was really interesting. But then I realized, I've actually had these presentations where people, I knew they were going to disagree with me, and then because they disagreed with me they were so stubborn, they refused to listen to what I had to say, even though I was clearly right. Sorry. So I feel like that was part of the election.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and Matt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if you start your presentation with, all right, by the end of this presentation, you're going to sign a contract for $30,000. How does that sound? All right, let's start with that. That's where we're going. That's the bottom line. Now, since we're going to disagree on that point, let me draw you in a little bit. So I would recommend using that carefully. Sometimes there's some gray area, but for the most part, I would say if your audience is going to react negatively, then take them through your process before you get to your bottom line. Okay, so that's the beginning, the middle, we'll get to the end. Remember, the attention retention curve is high at that point. That gives us a chance to accent our important points. Cement those points, short-term to long-term memory. We've got our audience listening. That's a chance again to tell them exactly what we've just told them. Okay, presentation method. Let's talk about these 4 presentation methods. Read word for word, memorize word for word, use an outline or memorize outline. Let's go through them one by one and decide which one we like best and which one you will probably do for your conclusion presentation next week. First, read word for word. What are the advantages to a presentation read word for word, and when might you want to use that type of presentation? Matt, do you ever want to use that presentation? No. Let me tell you why you should buy this product. It is the best thing ever.
You can't be animated, and it's really easy to tune out.
Okay, it's easy to, your audience will tune out. Why?
Because it's very monotonous, it's hard to be animated, and you can't really read their reaction to the...
Okay, so it's hard to read the reaction when you're reading. The other thing is it's not your words. It's someone else's words. They're like, you came here just to read me a piece of paper? Let me have a piece of paper. I'm going to read it myself. See what it says.
When you're reading, you're not making eye contact as well, so I thought that would definitely make them not interested.
Okay, absolutely. Arpit.
If you're reading word for word, then the listener's going to think, well, why are you here? I could read it on my own.
Yeah, exactly. You can grab it right out of your hand. So let me read that. Michael?
You're not gonna believe someone who's not confident reading means he's not confident.
Okay.
So if you're gonna be giving a presentation, you want to be confident.
Absolutely. Carrie?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think face-to-face is really important, so you can be looking down while the other people are looking at you. It's like the moment, so.
Great points, yes?
It's kind of like along the line of what you said. It's like if you're trying to get me to believe in something, it looks like you don't even believe in it. So, like you're reading off the script.
Enough to memorize it. Okay. All right, so for the most part, we don't want to give someone a word-for-word presentation, especially if it's a smaller, more intimate audience. If it's a huge audience, if we're doing something for television, for the President of the United States, and we're making an important announcement or an important speech, in those occasions, we might want to consider reading word for word, but we will try to avoid some of the pitfalls that you all have mentioned. We'll try to practice so that we can make eye contact. We'll try to become familiar with the words so they sound like they are our own words. We'll try to connect with the audience, and at the same time, we'll be able to use those crystal clear, well-planned words that were important to making our point. But for the most part, and especially in our presentations next week, we don't want to read word for word because of the reasons you all mentioned. Memorize word for word. This is slightly different. I've seen this used a couple of times. I've seen tour guides do this somewhat effectively. They'll memorize something word for word. They'll have a snappy way to say something. I saw an HR person do this not so effectively once. It was a you didn't get the job speech, and she had it memorized word for word. Like she knew she had to read the actual words for legal reasons, but she just memorized them. And I saw that. I'm like, good gosh, I don't like the way that's presented. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Yes, Miranda rights.
Miranda rights. Okay. 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 Good. That's an interesting one. So, yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of things we could talk about. It's almost like when you read Miranda rights, you want your audience to not realize what you're saying.
Yeah.
You want them to think. You want them to zone out. All right. So then they'll talk to you and confess to the crime, right? Yeah. Yeah. Daniel.
I think maybe for the first two, both word for words, makes it so you're not quite as flexible. So maybe if you plan exactly what you're going to say, and then during your presentation someone brings up another point or something, you maybe follow.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So memorize word for word and throw you off as you're responding to your audience. It's not going to go exactly as you planned. You're going to be nervous in a way during your presentation that you're not nervous when you're practicing. So giving yourself some flexibility can be helpful. Yes.
Or if you're trying to memorize word for word, if you get lost or forget a word, you can then like run through the whole speech again and kind of lose track of what you're saying because you're focused on hitting every single word memorized.
Yeah. So except for a few unique or I'd say narrow situations, memorized word for word is not very useful. Use an outline. How do we like that? So you're going to have an outline, and you're going to give your presentation, but you're going to refer to your outline. How do we like that as a presentation technique? Yes, Christian.
I like it because it gives you structure, but you're not really tied to it, whereas if you memorize something, you're kind of tied to that. If you have a basic outline, you can just look back at it, see your main points, and then...
Exactly. Just like the point that was just made. What's your name of it? Michael. I just like the point that Michael was making. You're not going to be thrown off if you have to go back trying to memorize word for word. You've got an outline you can refer to, and you can be flexible. Yes?
It also can make the audience know that you have well prepared for this presentation because you got the paper in your hand and that the audience know that you won't miss anything. And at the same time, you can make contact and it makes the speech very, very flexible because you didn't just read or memorize word for word.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So because you have this piece of paper in your hand, it shows your audience that there's a level of preparedness. Yeah. Okay, but you're also able to be flexible. Yes?
If you have your outline up on a PowerPoint like there, you can sort of guide your audience so we know we're on the third point, we're about to get to the fourth point, you know where you are in the presentation.
Yeah. So these are good points. They can help guide your audience. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm using an outline, and then I'm talking to you about the content of each point. It guides you, it guides me. I think if you have little notes there, sometimes that's fine. Matt?
If you tried to memorize the outline, you also not only have to memorize the outline, you have to memorize the content too. So you have the physical outline there, it's one less thing you have to worry about. You can focus on what you're actually saying instead of like get the outline right.
Okay. So it provides some structure for it. Yeah, it provides some structure for it. All right, let's talk about memorized outline. Does anyone want to speak up for that as being a better way? So you're going to memorize the 6 or 7 points or 5 points that you want to present on, but you're not going to speak word for word. So I want to talk about 5 things, and then as I go through each of those 5 things, I'm going to talk casually and connect with the audience. What do you think, Karen?
I think that really works well for like tour guides because they'll see cues and like different landmarks, and when they see a landmark, and it like really reminds them, okay, I have to talk about X. And then if they see another one, okay, I can talk about Y. And they see another one, I can talk about Z. But in a general, I don't think it works very well. I think it's still better to have it down a piece of paper just in case you forget something. You can actually go back to it and it provides more structure and it's more fluid.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think?
Would it potentially be, and same thing if you have something standard? So if it was a presentation you had to give monthly, like at a staff meeting, and you had the same 3 things that you needed to cover or something like that, where you, it's sort of like a standard outline, not like anything fluid.
Okay, so keeps the meeting going. Lets your audience know the structure of all your comments and all your presentations, so it might help them absorb it more effectively that way. Good. Yes.
I don't know about memorizing, but if you're familiar with the outline, it kind of helps transition better from one section to another.
Yes. So if you're very familiar with point 3 and how that relates to point 4, then that's going to help you transition. And actually memorizing point 1 through 4 might help you make that transition more effectively. Dan?
Maybe how you pick cues might depend on how long your presentation is. If you've got a long presentation where you're presenting a lot of material, it can be very difficult for you to keep everything straight in your head if you're doing a 3-minute presentation.
Yeah. Or what if you're doing like a 1 to 2 minute presentation like you're going to do next week? Okay. Maybe. What's that?
Don't use outline there. It's very short.
I could go either way. I'd say there is some advantage to memorizing your outline because this is a large room, but still there's only 30 or so of us, and we're all peers, or you're all peers. It's about, let me give you some important, valuable conclusion. Perhaps an outline might distract you and might get between you and the audience. There might be a little more clarity and a little more impact if you just have it. These are the 3 things I'm going to talk about in the next 90 seconds. I don't need to outline, I can focus on those. Yes, ma'am.
I'd say memorize the outline, and make an attempt to memorize it, but also, keep it a reference sheet with the outline that you normally plan to do, so that, in case there's any, a lot of questions that you didn't expect or whatever, you can have something to reference to get yourself back on track.
Okay, great stuff, great ideas. So I would recommend for your presentation next week, one of these techniques, use an outline or memorize the outline. So for our presentation, your presentation next week, think of some conclusion that you would like to present. 2 minutes, it has 2 minutes here, we'll say 1 to 2 minutes. I'm not going to give anyone a hard time for being too short. Often short and effective is better. So 1 to 2 minutes in length. Let's think about this framework we outlined in class. You're going to have a beginning, middle, and end. You're going to think about how you want to present that. Do you want to do the conclusion first? Do you want to do the conclusion last? What sort of nonverbal techniques might you use to accent your conclusion? Like pausing, changing your pace, shift in movement. You're not going to have any slides. It's just going to be you standing up here, giving us your 1 to 2 minute conclusion. So you may have to use, you're not going to be able to use visual aids, but you will use the other nonverbal techniques for making a conclusion. And we'll present this in class too. I want to do 2 things now. One, I want to ask you if you have any questions. And then I want to brainstorm some ideas of things that you could present on, just to get you thinking about what those presentations might be. Hopefully you're not going to worry too much about coming up with the perfect presentation topic. Just something that's meaningful to you, important perhaps to you in your MBA studies, something you can practice making a conclusion on. It doesn't have to be a serious business thing, but so I'll do those 2 things. One, I'll ask you if you have any questions. Yes?
So when you say present a conclusion, when I think of the word conclusion, I think of end, but that's not what this necessarily means.
Right. Conclusion is the main important thing that I want you all to know. It is better to be a Mets fan than it is to be a Giants fan. That's the conclusion. That's the important thing. Or Jets. Yeah, Mets. What am I thinking of? Giants.
Well,
Jets.
that would work if you wanted
Sorry.
to.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yes.
Giants in baseball.
I'm kind of similar to her question, is that we're presenting the facts towards the conclusion as well. We're not just saying like this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we want it to be a good argument, just like we talked about in class. All right.
Like the whole thing we just talked about.
Yeah, the whole thing we just talked about. All right.
Because I think what she was saying is like when I just hear conclusions, like that final paragraph is only mine.
Yeah. So you're not going to stand up here and say, "I am an excellent candidate for the job." In my presentation.
Okay.
You're going to say, "I'm an excellent candidate for this job. I'm going to tell you why. Because I have accounting, I have this experience, and I have great people skills. So that makes me an excellent candidate for this job. Thank you for your time." All right, so that's a logical argument with premises that are going to support your conclusion. And as you mentioned, your conclusion is not necessarily going to be at the end. It's going to be where you decide it needs to be for maximum audience impact.
So,
Yes.
so we say maximum audience impact. So based on the audience and based on the context, we're actually going to choose conclusion first or conclusion last, right? So what kind of, do you have any, like this kind of, this kind of presentation like sales, like or drawing an investor, we have to use this to get more effectiveness.
Oh, well, remember we mentioned the one time you might, when you present your conclusion last, is if you have a hostile audience. And by hostile, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to throw things at you. It's just going to mean that we might disagree with you. You say, all right, being a Giants fan is better than being a Jets fan. I don't know if I agree with that. So you might want to explain why that's important before you tell them that that's the conclusion, that's the takeaway. You could just assume your audience is other MBA students, If you'd like, you could say, I'm going to assume you all are investors that are going to invest in this company. And you might not start off with, all right, everyone get your checkbooks out and write out a check for $1 million. You might not start with that conclusion if you're pretending that we're all investors. Does that make sense? Amol.
And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be business related, or do you want it to be business related?
It can be about anything. So let's talk about some things that it might be about. Yes?
I should be accepted to Rutgers Business School because
Why what?
I should be accepted to Rutgers Business School.
Okay, yeah. So let me tell you that I should be accepted to Rutgers Business School for these three reasons. That's my conclusion. Let me explain that. I'm an excellent candidate for this job. I've heard a lot of those ones. You know, think about the job you're transitioning to. Use this as an opportunity to practice. You might have 3 reasons why you're an excellent candidate. Explain those terms. And I have heard, all right, let me get this right. So it's better to be a Jets fan than it is to be a Giants fan. That's all football, right?
Yes.
Okay. Better to be a Jets than it is a Giants. You could do that. Other ideas? Yes. 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 Great. Good chance to practice the I deserve a raise speech. Conclusion is I deserve a raise. Blake.
Could it be something just completely opinionated? Like, I think gummy bears are better than gummy worms?
Sure. Sure, as long as you have a logical argument. Yeah. Anything else? Mike.
It's like renting a house versus, owning a house versus renting an apartment.
Yeah, yeah. So for that one, you might say, you might have an opinion or a conclusion that says one is better than the other. So I'm going to tell you why it's better to own than rent. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So there's a lot of great ideas. Notice every idea everyone said, I said, yeah, that's a great idea, just as long as you formulate it in the conclusion framework. So pick something that you would like to practice from a presentation standpoint. Use the conclusion framework and prepare that for class next week. So we're going to move on to the writing section. This will not take too long. Let's take maybe another half an hour. Do we need a break? Are we good on that? Do we just want to keep going? We're going to take a couple minutes. Keep going? Keep going? All right. So, writing conclusions. I mentioned at the beginning, we could call them conclusions, but writers will often call this a thesis, just the same as the thesis you studied in high school English class. This is the central, important takeaway to your writing. Thesis definition, so we're all on the same page, a short statement that summarizes the main point of an essay. Also, so we're all on the same page, let's talk about the difference between a topic and a thesis. I could use this material for the conclusion of an oral presentation as well, but for some reason when we write, it's just a little bit easier to ramble on and on about a topic without having a clear thesis, because writing more elaborate, we can draw more details, we can put on more context, and by the time we get to the end of the essay, we might realize, gosh, I just haven't really zeroed in on a thesis. So, the topic is a subject, an issue, a problem. Thesis is the finding, proposal, conclusion, point, opinion, thing that you're going to say about that subject, issue, or problem. Exact same thing we just talked about for the last hour in conclusions and oral presentation. I bring this up because it's just a little more tempting to fall off course when we're writing than it is when we're talking. I'm going to introduce a business essay framework which contains a number of elements that you will commonly use in business writing. This is not necessarily a framework that you will do all the time, or not necessarily, definitely not a framework you use all the time, but it's a framework that you can use a lot of the time, and practicing this framework will improve your critical thinking skills and will improve your writing if you can formulate ideas in this very structured format. And let me present this to you now, and we will do this you will write in this framework for an assignment that's due 2 classes from now, writing a conclusion, and we will use this framework again a couple of times throughout the quarter. So this essay is going to consist of a title, a thesis paragraph, subheadings, subheading paragraphs, topic sentences. Let me explain each of these. That's where we're going. I'm going to give you a one-page business essay format that's going to have all of these things. And we're going to think about how we can use these to make an effective, concise business essay. As an example, take a look at this one-page essay. Top, we've got this title, Recommendation for Organizational Changes. In this first paragraph, we have something that I'm going to call a thesis paragraph. It could be called other things, but what we'll call it for now is a thesis paragraph. Also in this top paragraph, you're going to have your one-sentence thesis. And I'll point it out to you now just so we have context. This writer is going to say, I recommend that we flatten our organizational structure, consolidate departments, and deploy an electronic notebook. Those are the things that this writer is recommending for this organization. Now, this writer also has 3 subheadings. One is flatten organizational structure, the other is consolidate departments, the third is deploy an electronic notebook. Each of these subheadings is supported by a paragraph. Each of these paragraphs have a topic sentence, which I'm sure you've heard of, but we'll just refresh you on that. So we've got a title at the top, we've got a thesis paragraph with the thesis in it, we've got subheadings, we've got subheading paragraphs, each subheading paragraph has a topic sentence. I ran through that quickly, let me dissect each of those. Title. All right, when you present this title for your written conclusion that you're going to do 2 weeks from now, what do we need out of a good title? What do we want our title to do for our audience? Yes?
Catchy.
Catchy. I like it, yes. What else?
Memorable.
Memorable. Yes. What else?
Informative.
Informative. I like it. That's what I'm looking for. So it informs your audience what this might be about, and it's memorable, it's enticing somehow. Engages and informs the audience, provides context, may provide the thesis. You may have the thesis right in your title. You may not, depending. Now, this thesis paragraph, as I mentioned, you could call it other things besides a thesis paragraph. You might call it an introduction. You might call it a summary. I just like the term thesis paragraph. Don't be confused by that. It's going to provide some context. It's going to provide a one-sentence thesis statement. And it's also going to provide the predicted order of our subheadings. Remember the example, add subheadings. When we read this thesis paragraph at the beginning, I want you to show your audience what those subheadings are going to be and in what order they're going to be. Remember the example was for organizational changes, flatten organizational structure, do something else, electronic notebook. We saw that by reading the one-sentence thesis, and we knew where the subheadings were going. Provides context. Okay, so thesis paragraph example. I read through it very quickly and just gave you the one-sentence thesis, but let's quickly look at this example. I'll read through it. As an industry, pharmaceutical research is constantly evolving and pioneering new discoveries that help patients overcome disease. In order to remain competitive in this environment, our company structure must be able to support a flexible workforce. Therefore, I recommend that we flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, and deploy an electronic notebook. So it's concise, provides some context, and the thesis statement just jumps out at us, just hits us, right? We know exactly what this writer's going to recommend. We know exactly what's going to follow in this essay. Subheadings. Does anyone use subheadings? Does anyone use subheadings regularly? I know sometimes people like them, sometimes people don't like them. What has been your experiences? What have been your experiences with subheadings? Dan?
Just visually it helps
absolutely. Visually easier to break up the sections of your document, so it's easier for your audience to digest. Okay.
It gives you an idea about what's going to happen in the next paragraph.
Yeah, just hits your audience. Anything you can do to guide your audience is more effective. Arun?
Yeah, it gives them a methodical approach and it shows you what's heading, what's coming next.
Yeah, Blake.
They're good for procedure manuals. If you're unfamiliar with something, I'll tell you the steps, then you can identify a step that you need more information about.
Yeah, and we want to use this type of document the same way. We want to be able to jump to the points where we want to read for further information, just like you do when you're looking for a procedure manual. What procedure am I weak on? All right, good. So you all like subheadings. No one said anything bad about subheadings, so that's good. I like it. Definitions, so we're all on the same page. Heading given to subsection piece of writing, yada yada. Predictable. Parallel structure, concise. What I mean by predictable is when we read that thesis statement, we want to be able to predict what the subheadings will be. We don't want our thesis statement to say one thing and our subheadings to be a different order or different things. That's confusing to our audience. And we don't want to confuse our audience. We want to bring them into this concise, important conclusion. Parallel structure. What does that mean? Yes?
It means all the subheadings in the similar structures.
Yes, similar structure?
Yeah, and make it easy to understand and good looking.
You're onto it? Can anyone be more specific with parallel structure? Yes, ma'am.
Making sure you're sticking to the subheading. You're making sure you're not deviating from the subheading.
Okay, so when you write the subheading, the information you put below the subheading should be relevant to that. It should. That's not what I mean by parallel structure, though. Christian?
It's the structure of it, like, it's in order of thesis. So, like, for this thesis, it was like 1, 2, 3, and this one was 1, 2, 3, so like 2, 3, 1. It's not maintaining the same order as the thesis.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's what I mean by predictable. So we want predictable. Matt?
Just follow the same format for each subheading as you go throughout the paper.
Okay, anyone else?
Suppose if I'm taking examples at the end of the first subheading section, so I will make sure that for the rest of the subheading also I mention the examples at the end, so that if I'm looking for some quick reference, I would immediately go to the last line.
Yes, I agree with you completely.
It's lined up, has the same tense and format?
Yes, same tense. The same tense, you're halfway there. It's the same part of speech. So if you have if you're all verbs, or they're all nouns, or they're all two-word nouns, you keep that same part of speech. Does that make sense? Let's show some examples of that in a minute. Does that make sense, Michael? Okay. Concise parallel structure. So let's look at this example. This is the same thesis paragraph we looked at before. This pharmaceutical research, some context. Boom. Hit us with the thesis statement, the recommendation. The subheadings are flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, and deploy the electronic notebook. We can see when we read the thesis statement that this is going to be the 3 subheadings. These are going to be the 3 subheadings. They are going to be in this order, and they are in parallel structure because they each start with a verb, noun, verb, noun, verb, noun. Now these are 2-word nouns, so maybe you can give me a hard time and say it's not complete parallel structure, but it's pretty good and it's pretty close. Flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, deploy electronic notebook. Easier for your audience to absorb that. And you want to make everything as easy as possible. You don't want to make this mentally taxing. You don't want to say flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, and I would also recommend we think about electronic notebooks. Just throws your audience for a loop. See, I think I have some, we've got some examples here. Parallel structure. Check it out. Example. Accounting, we've got 3 subheadings. Accounting, finance, I recommend small class size. Is that in parallel structure? No. We've got noun, and then something else. And it's not a one word, it's confusing. What are you talking about? I thought we were talking about accounting, finance, and then marketing. Then like small class. Another example. Contain accident site, control environment, question witnesses. Parallel structure? Yeah, it just flows. Example. Italy, France, Brooklyn. It's arguable. But you can see, I like this example because it just kind of like throws you like, what are you talking about? France, Italy, Brooklyn, they're not in the same league, right? Is this a subheading under something else? I don't know what's going on here. So this is confusing from that standpoint. But if you needed to make the argument, you could make the argument that they're all places. I wouldn't count off for this, but I use this example to show you how it might be confusing if you don't adhere as much as possible to parallel structure. Okay? So we're going to have our clear thesis statement, which is going to be contained in this thesis paragraph. We're going to have an informative, engaging title, and we're going to have subheadings that are in predicted order and parallel structure. Below each subheading, we're going to have subheading paragraphs. And those subheading paragraphs are going to have a topic sentence. Can someone tell us what a topic sentence is?
The main idea of what basically your conclusion was, the main point of your,
Yes, the main idea of a paragraph in which it occurs. Mini thesis for that paragraph. Typically, it's going to be the first sentence. And I would say for you all, you want it to pretty much always be the first sentence. You may recall from English in high school that there are different ways to do it. You might be dramatic and lead up to your topic sentence. If you're Edgar Allan Poe, you might put your topic sentence in the middle and do some sort of creative thing. But for most of the writing you all are doing, I'm going to recommend the topic sentence be the first sentence of that paragraph. There's definitely creativity in what we do, innovative business things we all come up with, but this is not the area when I'd recommend you be creative with the structure. Put this main idea of your paragraph in the top sentence. For example, this is one of the subheadings in the example I mentioned, the flattened organizational structure. And so we've got our topic sentence at the top. First, we must flatten organizational structure in order to allow our scientists to make decisions faster. And then we go on. Our current level hierarchy requires this at multiple levels. With each level, the decision is moved further and further from the scientists involved with the project. Reducing these levels may increase agility, etc., etc. But this first sentence adds to the context. So you can see we've got a lot of things working to help our reader understand where we're going and what the context is. We can go back to the example. We've got our title, which is going to give our reader a good idea of where we're going. We've got something that provides context in the thesis paragraph, and we've got a very clear one-sentence thesis. We've got subheadings in predicted order and in parallel structure. Underneath those subheadings, we have a topic sentence to start off each paragraph. So many different things to reinforce our main point and to guide our audience. Now, once we use these things to reinforce our main point and guide our audience, I like to point out that we can get more complicated. Suppose for this flattened organizational structure, we want to talk about some, I don't know, I'd say this gets a little more complicated, but the point I want to make is that we can. We can talk at length about the complexity of our current situation and how improving it would help. Because we're not going to lose our audience, because we know that our audience is informed by the subheading and informed by the topic sentence. And from there, we can go into more complicated wording. Does that make sense? So what I like about this structure is it just jumps out at you. You look at it, it takes you maybe 20 seconds to figure out exactly what the writer's trying to say, and you know where you can look at each point in this structure for more details. And if the writer wants to get more complicated, she or he can get more complicated within those details, within those frameworks. And I grade this based on clarity as well. I want you to be clear in your writing, and I want your audience to understand what you're trying to say. But I also would recommend you be cognizant of how I grade it. And I grade it based on that clarity. A 10 out of 10 paper just jumps out of it. Like I said, it takes me 10, 15 seconds to realize exactly what you're saying because you've adhered to all this structure. I don't even need to read it. Sometimes it may take me a total of a minute, 2 minutes to grade a 10 out of 10 paper. But to grade a 6 out of 10 paper sometimes takes me an hour or longer. Sometimes I'll have to put it to the side, come back to it later that weekend. Like, what is this person talking about? And I have to unpack it. This person is trying to impress me with a bunch of complicated language about project management. It's causing me frustration and stressing me out. It took me all weekend once to grade someone's paper. So I wanted to just jump out at you because you've used these techniques and because you've provided that clarity for me. Any questions on this? I think you'll find this to be a valuable exercise. And I think this fits in with an MBA value statement of knowing a lot about many subjects and being able to take those sources of information and condense them down to a one-page, this is the important thing, this is the conclusion. Your ability to put things in those types of terms is something that may be very useful for you in your career. A lot of times as MBAs, you may find yourself in a position of working with the people on the front lines, understanding the stuff that the entry-level folks do, but you might have an ability, you do have an ability to interface with senior management in a way that people on those front lines can't quite do. You have the ability to draw the conclusions and frame it in a way that an upper-level management audience can understand. And again, I mentioned when I went into that annoyingly long discussion of plagiarism that sometimes folks get confused when they see I want this specific structure. They don't realize that it's a process of them coming up with their own original wording. And it is. It's a process of you putting your own original wording in this very stylized structure. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to think about how can I condense this down. And I think this is a useful exercise for you. I've gotten good feedback on teaching people this structure. And the more you invest in it, the more it's going to help you in this class because we're going to do this exact same thing 3 times total. This exercise and 2 assignments after this exercise. And I think it's going to help you in your business careers, which is obviously much more important. I'm not going to tell you just do this because I'll give you 10 out of 10 on the assignment. I'm going to tell you do this because I'm going to give you 10 out of 10 on the assignment, and it's going to help you think about how you're going to concisely say these important things that relate and get into more complicated language using this simplified structure that helps your audience understand. Any questions? All right, so what do we got here? We talked about title, thesis, paragraph, boom, boom, boom. Parallel structure examples, thesis, subheadings, written conclusion assignment. So, write an essay for class 3 that states and supports a conclusion. 1 page in length, single-spaced. Use this framework. Submit via Blackboard prior to class 3. Again, it can be about anything. Why it's better to be a Jets fan than a Giants fan. Why you should buy this product. Why you're an excellent candidate to be an investment banker. Yes?
What about the spacing of the font?
Normal, 12-point font. Single spacing?
Single spacing.
Yeah, single spacing. Yes?
Can we use the same topic that we do on our
Of course.
presentation?
Of course. Yes. And I think a lot of people do, and I think that's a great exercise to think about how you would present something orally and how you would present that in writing. What's the same, what's different? Absolutely. You might want to get them both done before next week. if you're provided you're not busy with Labor Day picnic and whatnot. Other questions? All right, I want to do one thing quickly. I want to make sure I've got everyone's name to the best of my ability. And also, even if I get everyone's name, I didn't really talk about class participation. You guys are great with this class discussion. I appreciate it. That's the kind of thing that is going to make this a more positive learning environment. I want to hear your thoughts, your insights on the content. I also want to hear your insights on your classmates' presentations. The more you can think about what your classmates did that was effective, the better you can explain how your classmates might have done something more effectively, the better you're going to develop your own presentation skills. So it's very important that you engage in class, and it is a big part of your grade. This is a communications class. Coming to class, actively participating in the discussion and the assignments is going to be where you're going to get the value. So, with that, I will assign everyone a class participation grade. Every class from 1 to 5 points. I put the grading scale somewhere on the syllabus. I think I say 3 points just for showing up and pretending like you're engaged. 4 points for making a comment or two. 5 points for really engaging and making some insightful comments. If you miss class, I will videotape every class and I will post those videos. I'll have links to them on Blackboard. I have a system where I put them on YouTube. Don't worry, no one's going to be searching YouTube for your communications class presentation. So it's easy for you to find. It's easy for me to transfer that format. It's a good way for you to critique your own presentation. You can look back in the video and say, gosh, I was really doing some nervous gesturing there. Or gosh, my conclusion wasn't as clear as I thought it was when I was standing up there and was nervous. If you miss class, you may watch the video. Watch the video and send us, as your classmates, a few comments about the content. You can comment on things just as you commented on class content tonight, or you can also critique your classmates. Say, Michael, that was a great presentation you gave, but your eye contact was a little sporadic. You were looking down most of the time. I think you should make strong, powerful content. Use the Blackboard system and just do email everyone in class. I think it's the best way to do it. And I think the guidance is 2 or 3 insightful comments will get you the full 5 points of class participation if you have to miss class. Any questions on it? Yes, Matt.
If it's a class where you were supposed to present something, could you record yourself doing it and send it to you or the class?
Sure. Sure. You'll notice I'm not as grading for the actual presentations. I'm not as it's not as big of a deal as grading for the stuff that you actually submit. So we'll usually be able to work that out pretty easily. Other questions? All right. So I am going to. Everyone gets full class participation points for the first class. So let me. I have to do this because if I go home, I won't remember who people are. So Matthew. Yes, Matthew.
But you can cut off. Well, I mean, they added part of my middle name. I don't know why I did that. So just Matthew or Matt, whatever.
Okay, Matthew. Got it. All right. I tried to memorize everyone's name before I start class, but I wasn't quite successful this time. All right. So I've got 2 Michaels. Michael Berger. Michael Berger. Okay. What's your last name, Mike? Shira. Okay. So Michael. All right. And Rochelle. Yes. Also known as Blake. Rochelle. All right. Michael. Good. And Brian Callahan. No, Brian? Okay. Alex. Allie. Yes. All right. Cynthia. Michael. Siddharth. Yes. Siddharth. Got it. All right. Alicia?
She's not here.
James.
Jamie's fine.
Jim. Mole Rob? J. J. Rob. Should I call you J? I'll call you J. Yiffy? Yiffy. Yes. Do you have another name you told me? Gracie. Yes. Should I call you Yiffy or Gracie? Okay. Do you prefer Gracie? Okay. Shruti. Yes. Priya. Okay, perfect. Carrie's here, Rebecca's here, Daniel's here, Pete, Christian. Is there 3, Matt? No, that's Matt. It's different. That's the.
I'm Matt Roselli.
Okay, you're Matt Roselli. Okay, Matt. You're both Matt. You're Matthew or Matt?
You can call me Matthew since he's Matt.
Okay. All right. Rutha? Rutha, yes, Rutha. Lima is here. Lima off the side. Sefit? Yes. Okay, you two just have to sit together. I have an mnemonic based on you two sitting together. Jyoti? Rajesh? Yes, Rajesh. Julia? Julia. Ricky? Julia. Okay. Yi? Yes. Anukrit. Anukrit. Anukriti. 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 Chia? Jesse. Jesse, okay. Jerry. Carrie. Wait, you're Carrie. Is there Jerry here?
No, Jerry dropped the class.
Loon?
He's gonna drop it.
Gonna drop it. Okay. Alright, so Matthew, Michael Berger. Brian's not here. Allie is here. Shinfu. Yeah. Shinfu. Michael C. Siddharth. Siddharth. Sadhu. Siddharth. Sadhu. Okay, Aisha's not here. Jim. Mole. Rob. Jay. Okay. Jay. Yeet. Oh, Grace.
But you remember?
Shruti? Yes.
Oh,
Priya.
Nelson. Yeah, I did.
Gary, what's Gary? Yes. Rebecca, Daniel, Christian, Matthew. Reggie. Okay, awesome. Thank you for bearing with me with that. I'm excited to have you all in class. I look forward to hearing your oral presentations next week. And I'll get Blackboard up and running for you.
Carrying me, right?
I will just read on the screen. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to read on the screen.
And as soon as I started talking about watch the video, and then your classmates. Going back to the city, or?
You guys ready to figure out your talks?
Yeah.
We'll just start it along
I'm gonna,
with everyone else.
it's
And
like.
we'll figure out time.
I am trying to figure It actually, for the grader, it actually. I already drew him. He's like, oh.
I know.
Okay.
No one's stealing. No one's stealing. I'm gonna see if it's okay with them, but I'm gonna ask him.
Why would you? I would just do it, dude. I mean,
and if you're really nice, you can just do that.
Yeah.
We'll look for it when we get home. Yeah, don't make that. Okay, no, not leaving. I don't even know what the next train is.
Oh, no.
And I'll get that for up and running, so she'll be able to access it then.
So check it out. Look at you.
Is it tagged?
They're all falling.
No, I just saw it.
Good, I'm gonna find it.
No, please.
Next 6 Mondays, do you have course or how are you?
Hey, Ricky.
Okay, so Tuesday will be on the schedule of Monday.
Yes. Don't forget. Are you not going to see March?
Yeah.
I think so. Oh, okay. I got it. Okay. Just make sure. Where are you
Yeah, are you taking a break?
Yeah, are you?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'll wait.
Yeah, hang out for a second.
But we should get that.
What's the schedule? What time does it leave? Yeah.
No, I'm showing you. Go where? It's not till 8:36.
Oh, until 8:36.
Oh, were you taking the half? Okay. When, I was gonna.
There's beautiful courts. Well, I
I was gonna.
Oh, but you take the path from after the Penn Station, right? Yeah, so you still have to take the later. What time
When is your next train?
If you want to, I
wasn't watching my round.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know.
Hopefully, the level of conclusion.
I just got like restrung, and like I got like my car was like
The main
stopped.
conclusion is this, your premise is that, which I don't quite understand the numbers behind, it sound like you're confident on it, and I do understand the second premise, and I know how they all work to the
The corporate presentation.
So my question is for my topic. I say,
Music to my ears?
Oh, perfect, awesome.
And then talk about what a great professor is.
Okay, perfect, I love it.
Conclusion is, Zach is the best professor ever.
So can I start off with like, I don't know, is people gonna be hostile toward it? Should I start off with like, that's what my question was.
Okay, so let's think about it. I don't think people will be hostile.
Okay, good.
Because business communication is important.
They're also taking a class, right?
We're taking a class, and we saw some video clips last week, which showed us some exciting stuff about fighting off alien invasion. How that really is important. So let's think of some other reasons why. That's how I would approach it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You,
That intellectual. Yeah, I don't know.
No, there's no app for it. I think someone does have an app, but you have to have an icon.
I was really trying to make us get up and
maybe
move
for example,
on.
that's how it'll be informative. Let me tell you about the car. Maybe be persuasive. You should buy this product because see the value is going up and up. And you will follow this format in terms of the PowerPoint that you do. You'll use a good template, you'll use a graph, you'll insert a picture, you use animation effects where the interesting comes in. You'll do all this stuff that I'll talk about during class 3, and you'll hopefully use the good inclusion techniques we talked about tonight, and you use some of the good body language techniques that we'll talk about next week. Yeah?
And the oral topic, I mean, anything?
Yeah, you have some idea? What's your topic?
I don't know, maybe like, I think Jay stole my idea on something maybe, like you were mentioning what your background in acting